Hello everyone, welcome to What's Up in Portugal. I'm your host Perry, and today we're going to be talking about something that you've been waiting a long time for. That's right, boys and girls. Today we're going to be talking about port wine. Yes! Port wine, or Vinho do Porto in Portuguese, literally wine from Porto, is perhaps the most famous and well-known drink from Portugal. It's a fortified wine, like sherry or marsala or vermouth, but it's made exclusively in the Douro Valley region of northern Portugal. Any other fortified wine not made with the grapes grown in the Douro Valley cannot legally be called port wine, and if you try to pass it off as port wine, you can go to prison. Yeah, that's how seriously they take it here. The Douro region is the third oldest protected wine producing area in the world, after the Tokaj-Hegialia region of Hungary, really sorry I butchered that, and Chianti in Italy. They don't require you to eat fava beans there. But wine has been produced in this region ever since the Romans settled in this area. Port wine is heavily connected with Great Britain, and its connection is fascinating and a true romance story. And like a true love affair, it began with a glass of wine. In 1678, a Liverpool wine merchant sent two of his representatives to Portugal to learn about the wine trade, and one day the two gentlemen were holidaying in the Douro. There they met the abbot of Lamego, who fed them and offered them a sweetish, strong wine at the end of their meal. They loved it so much that they bought all of his stock and brought it back to England. Of course they brought it back by boat. They didn't have to pay extra baggage or worry about putting it in the overhead locker. In 1703, Great Britain signed the Treaty of Melvin with Portugal, which was a military and commercial treaty during the War of Spanish Succession. The treaty is quite long and kind of boring, but the important part for us is the second treaty that they signed, known as the Port Wine Treaty, on December 27, 1703. It basically said that British woolen products could be brought into Portugal without having to pay a duty on tax. In return, Portugal could export wine to Great Britain at a third of the tax cost compared to wine imported from France. At the time, French wines were the most popular and the most imported wines into Britain. But because Britain was at war with France, that made it a bit tricky to bring in French wines. This greatly helped the Portuguese wine trade, and particularly the port wine trade. The wine became popular with the British because it was sweet, but it could also be transported to the other side of the world without spoiling. Port wine has a stronger alcoholic content than normal wine. Once the grapes have been harvested, collected, pressed, and fermented just like in normal wine making, a strong grape-based alcohol called aguardente is poured in to stop the fermentation process. This boosts the wine's alcoholic content from about 11 to 12% to 18 to 20%. By the way, aguardente in Portuguese means firewater. Can you see why? Aguardente is neutral flavored, which means that it doesn't affect the overall taste of the wine. The fact that it's also made from grapes means that you're not mixing your drinks. Not that that matters to some people. There's a common misconception that British sailors poured rum or brandy into the wine so that it would last a journey across the seas, because it would stop the wine from turning into vinegar. The spiking with aguardente was done to make it a dessert wine, but it also had the added benefit of being able to travel well. The English love affair with port wine didn't just stop at importing it. In order to get access to the best wines, they set up shop in Vila Nova de Gaia, and you can see this reflected on the names of the companies that are still operating there, such as Graham's, Dow's, Offley's, Cockburn's, Sandman. Many of these companies are still owned by the original English families. Of course, the English aren't the only ones to own port houses. There are at least a couple of Portuguese ones, such as Ferreira and Fonseca and Ramos Pinto. There's also a German, Burmeister, and a Dutch, Nieuwpoort. I think that's how you pronounce it. And many, many others. Until 1986, port wine could only be exported from Porto. Once the wines were fermented, they were brought down the Douro River in these boats called rabelos, but nowadays they are brought down by tanker trucks, mostly because in the 1950s and 60s, construction of hydroelectric dams up the river made transport by ship almost impossible. The port industry is estimated to be worth $500 million. That's not bad. Once the grapes have been harvested, pressed, and fermented during the autumn and winter, they are transported to the port houses of Vila Nova de Gaia, where they are blended and matured into a variety of styles. The IVDP, the Instituto dos Vinhos do Douro e Porto, or the Institute of Wines from the Douro and Porto, divide the port into two styles: normal ports and special categories. Normal ports include standard rubies, 3-year-old tawnies, and white port. Special categories include everything else. A vintage port is made exclusively from grapes harvested in a time that they call a vintage year. It's a little complicated, but it goes something like this. A vintage year is declared in the spring 2 years after the collection. That means that if you collect grapes now, you won't know if it's a vintage until 2 years from now. But don't hold your breath just yet, because vintages are extremely rare and account for only about 2% of the overall port production. The decision to declare it a vintage is down to each individual port house. So if you own a port house, you could declare it a vintage every year if you wanted to. Just be warned that it's a cutthroat industry, and reputations are won and lost with each bottle of wine. So if you decide to declare it a vintage, you gotta make sure that it is really, really good. Some of the most common bottles that you can find from a year declared as vintage are from 2011, 2007, 2003, 2000, and 1997. But you can find vintages even older than that, some from the 1800s. The oldest known bottle of vintage is a bottle from the Ferreira Company dating back to 1815. Think about it, Napoleon was still alive when it was bottled. Tawny port is made from red grapes that are aged in wooden barrels and are exposed to the air. So there is evaporation and gradual oxidation. Because of this, they turn into a mellow, golden brown color and usually has a nutty flavor to it. Ruby port is the most inexpensive and the most extensively produced type of wine. After it's fermented, it's stored in concrete or stainless steel tanks to prevent any oxidation, thus preserving the rich red claret color. Once you buy it, it's best to drink it straight away because it doesn't really improve much with aging. Late bottle vintage, or LBV for short, is wine bottled from leftovers of a vintage port. For whatever reason, such as lack of demand or for whatever else, the wine was left in the barrel longer than expected. Over time, two different styles emerged. One filtered and fined before bottling, and the other not filtered. Basically, filtered can be drank straight away. Yes! Unfiltered needs to be decanted, and as it waits, sediment falls onto the bottom of the decanter, which means that you don't end up drinking it. LBVs are meant to give you the experience of drinking a vintage port without having to wait all that time for it to age and mature properly. And it also means you don't end up paying a fortune for one bottle. White port is made from white grapes, obviously, and most producers only make a standard variety. White port is best served chilled, but a popular way of drinking it, especially in the summer, is to mix it with tonic water, like a gin and tonic. I personally don't like it because white port has a very delicate flavor and the tonic water completely overpowers it. Rosé port is a more recent variation, first produced in 2008. It's technically a ruby wine, but it's processed in the same way as rosé wine, meaning that exposure to the grape skins is limited, so the color is a lot lighter. If you don't know how rosé wine is made, it's basically made the same way as white wine, but they add the skins of red grapes to that. So you don't get the taste of a red wine, but you do get a little bit of that color. Rosé port isn't all that popular, but it's reasonably priced, so if you do get a chance to try one, why not? One cultural faux pas you don't want to commit is you don't want to order port wine with your main meal. It's meant to be drunk as an aperitif or as a dessert wine. It's not meant to be drunk while you eat your main meal. If you order fish or steak with your port wine, then your waiters will laugh at you. And so will I. Most port is drunk straight, meaning you pour it into the glass and you drink it. No fuss, no complications. Just my style. But we're starting to see more cocktail recipes made with port wine. One that I told you about is the port and tonic, where you get tonic water and mix it with port. Like I said, I don't personally like it, but it's become really popular across Portugal in the last several months. Another cocktail recipe that I like goes like this. Put some ice in a cocktail shaker. Add a shot of vodka, 2 shots of ruby port, and half a shot of cranberry juice. Close it up. give it a shake, and then strain it into a martini glass, or any other glass you have. I'm a poor guy. However you decide to drink it, make sure you do it responsibly. My lawyer told me I have to say that. Hope you enjoy it. See you next time. Everyone, thank you so much for watching this episode. We really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, give us a thumbs up. Press that subscribe button to receive more awesome videos such as this. Share with your friends if you want them to learn more about port wine, or at least implant the idea into their heads to do a pub crawl with you. Check us out on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. So until next time, saúde!